from the Free Speech Studios. Deep within the city of Fantom, with over 4 years of satisfying the curious mind and looking damn sexy while doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, Fantom Facts Society.
Welcome, everyone, to a very special Monday night episode of Fantom Facts Society. Came in a little early there, man. I'm excited.
I was wondering. I didn't see the dancing.
No, I'm all pumped. We have a very special guest joining us tonight. United States Air Force retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Brock. I had to pull it up and type it out. I wanted to make sure I said it right. And this man has a lot to tell us. And I'm so grateful he's decided to come on the show. He might be regretting it, music choices, but we'll bring him on anyway before he can back out.
It's too late now.
I don't think I'm that scared.
Okay. Yeah. I think you've been through worse.
I would definitely agree with that statement.
Well, thank you, first of all, for coming on the show, especially on short notice. I saw your X Spaces and was going over your account, and this is just something that is not talked about for the past 4 years. People just disappeared, and just now we're starting to hear stories, and so I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us as well. Well, we sort of at Fantom Facts, we like to start at the very beginning and get to know you a little bit because I don't know you from Adam. When did you join the military? What made you want to join the Air Force?
Like most military people these days, it's pretty much a hereditary thing. I'm a fourth generation American military, fifth generation Texan. It's kind of expected in my family to do that. Now, I would also tell you that my grandfather had tried to become a pilot in World War II, and then they figured out he was colorblind. And then my father wanted to do that as well, but just didn't jump through all the hoops that you need to do. So I think those two had a vested interest in trying to get me to actually go to the Air Force Academy and become a pilot. And honestly, they succeeded. I actually joined the Air Force Academy in 1985. Interesting thing about that, my junior year, my dad just comes up to me and says, "Hey, how'd you like to take a trip up to the Air Force Academy and just kind of take a look at it?" I was like, "Yeah, that'll be an enjoyable thing." So get out of school, go up there for 3 days, took a look around and thought it was pretty cool. Come back and he asked me what I thought. And I said, "Yeah, I think it's a great school. I'd like to go there." Of course, that day when I got back from school, there was a typed application on my desk. I mean, dad's no fool, $100,000 a year savings in education. So I went to the Air Force Academy. I'm very glad I did. It's a great place to be from. Like most cadets, I got in a little bit of trouble there. Well, let me rephrase that. Like most cadets that fly fighters, I got in a little bit of trouble there. So I was a centurion, which meant that I marched 100 hours back and forth with a rifle on the terrazzo. So I guess it was a little bit of a precursor for later in life. So
was that Colorado Springs there?
Yeah, I was in Colorado Springs, which I was pretty convinced, being from Texas, was part of the Arctic Circle. It was like a special little finger that just jutted down there. So went there.
You're wrong.
Well, I don't know. That wind on a cold January day at the Air Force Academy will definitely bite you. So I graduated from there and went to pilot training. Did really well in pilot training. Let me back up just 1 second. So when I went to the academy, though, I still was thinking that I would be a doctor. It's just one of the things I wanted to do. I took a lot of biology classes. So I come home after my freshman year, and my dad was in the 301st Fighter Squadron, as an enlisted man. And so he calls me up at 6 o'clock one morning and says, "Hey, get your flight suit on and get out here. I got you a backseat ride in an F-4 Phantom." So I had been out carousing the night before, so I am a little bit hungover. a lot hungover, to be honest. And so I walk in smelling like a distillery, and the pilots are like, "When's the last time you had a drink?" And I was like, "I think the rule is 12 hours, right?" And they said, "Yeah." And I went, "About 12 hours and a couple of minutes ago." And he's like, they literally said this. They're like, "You're going to fit in well." So anyway, so we went up that day. I think I threw up a couple of times. We had a great time. We did air to ground, little air to air. But when I landed from that flight, I was like, I got to do this for a living. This is just too much fun. And I will tell you, being an American fighter pilot was the joy of my life. You know, it's literally suspended adolescence. Later on in life, we had a party, and one of our lieutenants actually said this, and it stuck with me. He says, you know, he's got a cigar in his mouth and a bourbon and Coke in the other. And he's like, "This is like being in a biker gang, except my mom's proud of me." I was like, great quote.
Well, and I mean, I love World War II history. I love all the World Wars history, and to hear about, you know, really the planes taking primary force there in World War II, and just sort of how the Germans described them, and how they hunt like a pack of dogs. And it's just, you know, it's something, if you're not experiencing it, you would never, you can't comprehend it. You know, it's,
you know, I would have loved to have flown in Northern Europe, especially the P-47, which was the precursor, the original Thunderbolt to the A-10 Thunderbolt II. I mean, got to be honest with you, I always wanted to strafe a train. Never got the chance to do it, but boy, I wanted to. And I think it's from all those World War II movies we saw as kids.
Now, we're not sponsored, but War of Thunder, you do have that opportunity.
You do.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I've strafed plenty of trains. So my great grandfather was Curtis LeMay, and so that's
a hell of a name to have.
well, and you know, this crazy thing is I just found this out, you know, about 10, 15 years ago, and so I got his autobiography, and in the very beginning, he goes, "I'm not here to delve into whether what we did was moral or not. That's for other people to figure out. I'm just going to tell you what I did." And it's the best. It was the best intro to a book I've ever read. And I think that sort of describes like the Air Force. You focus on your mission. I mean, I mean, you did this for 20 years, correct?
29, actually.
29.
I flew the A-10 for 16 wonderful years of that, and then was in the reserve, just recruiting for the Air Force Academy and Air Force ROTC after that. But you know, there is a lot of truth to that. I will tell you, though, that we are a lot more humane these days in practicing Justinian warfare, and honestly, we can be. Laser guided bombs give us the ability to pinpoint drop, so that we can be more just and more discriminate in targeting than Curtis LeMay had to do, or had to be. But great figure in history. You know, I would argue that he's probably maybe the #1 killer of all time. And the reason I say that is, you know, his wing carpet bombed and firebombed Japan, and there's a lot of people that were on his Air Force's kill chart.
Well, we're killing it here on this show, so I'm sure he'd be proud. You do what?
Stone Age. That's the Curtis LeMay quote.
Well, and I don't know if you ever listened to Dan Carlin, Hardcore History.
I do. I love Dan Carlin.
One of my all-time favorites, and he talks about the bombing of Dresden. And I was doing for our show, we were doing research on the Germans practicing their bombing routines. And I can't remember if Carlin talked about this too, but they picked this town in Poland that was just perfectly square. And they're like, well, it's like the perfect baseline example, so let's just bomb them. And so they just bombed this town for no other reason than it was perfectly square. It just sort of describes what the Air Force, you know, the thought, you know, like, let's figure this out, you know, like. And but you know, the bombing of Dresden, I think it was Hellstorm or Hellfire. I can't remember the correct method. Firestorm.
Yeah, it's just incendiaries. When they get, you know, when you drop enough of them, you know, it's an effect of that. Always wanted to drop incendiaries too, but never got to do that as well. Or napalm, as the later version of it was called.
No, the A10 is. I saw those. I lived in Colorado Springs for 5 years out there, and I would see them do training missions with those A10 Warthogs, and they, they whistled like a bomb when they dove, and I never knew that. It's just like, it's amazing the psychological factor to engineering something like that and making sure to include that it whistles. It's just how.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. You may not know this, but this is a little piece of history as well. And you probably, from your World War II studies, Hans Ulrich Rudel. All right. He was the most decorated fighter pilot in aviation history. He was also a German, and he mainly fought the Russians on the Eastern Front. He killed a ton of tanks, etc. He actually blew up 2 Russian ships as well. But he was put on the design team for the A-10 Thunderbolt. And one of the things he recommended we add was Jericho sirens, something along the lines of the Stuka had. The classic sound that you hear. Now, the Air Force said no to that, but you're right, it does still kind of whistle. The cool thing about the A-10 is it's too late. By the time you hear me, you're either not the target or you're dead. So,
did you ever have any iffy moments when you were in combat, or were you pretty protected from any type of attack?
Well, I mean, the A-10 is very well protected, but yeah, there were some seriously iffy moments at times. A couple of them self-induced, and I say that because there were ground troops under fire in a valley, and so I had to, because we don't have a radar, I had to build a route at night while I'm flying, to drop down below the weather in the mountains. And it was kind of a curving route. So if I had screwed up and dialed in the digits wrong, I might have impacted the side of a mountain. The other thing too, is I had to come down the same chute a couple of times there, which you never like to do as a pilot, because the guy couldn't see me and clear me hot. And so all the enemy fire that was going at him actually started coming at me. So again, not a big deal. Like I said, you don't think of it at the time. You're concentrating on putting iron on target. So warheads on foreheads, as the saying goes.
Warheads on foreheads.
When you're called to go into a mission, is it usually to alleviate some ground troops that have come under fire? Is that the normal use?
That's the great thing about the A-10. Almost every time, okay, it was, they had either shot at Americans or our allies, were shooting at Americans or our allies, or were preparing to shoot at us. So again, it is literally, you're the cavalry. They're blowing the bugle, and in you come and you do your mission. So it was a very, very clean war for me. And I think that's, the reason that, a lot of people do have PTSD. I really don't. I did what was right. I protected our soldiers. I know that I faithfully followed the rules of war. So, I've got no problems with that. Other missions the A-10 did, obviously, were helicopter escort. Another cool one that's not really talked about that often was follow the Jeep. And you're saying, what the heck is that? Well, there's a money Jeep that had a bunch of money where we would go and bribe the local warlords. And if the negotiations weren't going well, we'd buzz it or maybe strafe a pasture right next to the village to get the warlord's attention that, hey, Uncle Sugar's not playing ball here anymore. You need to do what we tell you now.
Yes.
Oh,
I love that part.
Yeah. Well, and I know we didn't come to, talk about all the details of why you were, but I'm just sort of curious as to your progression through the military. And so, I mean, you're a pilot for how many years, and what do you do after that's done?
Well, all right. So I stayed only on active duty for 7 years. That was the service commitment. And then I went into the reserves flying the A-10. So you still had the same sortie requirement that you did on active duty. It's just it allowed me to also be a civilian. Now, I foolishly thought that would mean that I would be home more. As it turns out, being an airline pilot and being a reservist is pretty much, that eats away a lot of time with the family. So that was a price I paid for that. But so I worked for American Airlines for a while, and then I really, really hated that job. So I took a job overseas, working as a defense contractor with the Royal Saudi Air Force. I managed a team of consultants, And I also spied for the United States government while I was over there, getting them information that they wanted on the Saudis. So again, nothing that, it was a really high price you guys paid while you were over there, because you got my spy services for a 1.75 of Jim Beam Black pretty much a month. So, I was really charging the government a lot there.
Dang it. I mean, those are prices we can live with, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure Doge would approve of that message.
Yeah. Elon would have no problem.
No.
Yeah.
All right. So then I came back, did a couple of other civilian jobs working for a defense contractor and then an aviation services company. And then I got the flying bug again, and I went back flying as a civilian for L3 in an Air Force reconnaissance airplane. So I'm a civilian flying an Air Force plane with an Air Force officer, and what we're doing is we're hunting Al-Qaeda and Taliban in Afghanistan and Iraq, or ISIS in Iraq, as the case may be. So if you have one of these and Uncle Sugar doesn't like you, you need to put it down, because we will find you. So that's what I did. I actually happened to be in Iraq the day that the Iranian missiles hit Al-Assad Air Base in 2020. So I will tell you that we were all in a bunker, and every time you'd hear incoming, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. There are no atheists in a foxhole, or at least there wasn't that night.
Well, it depends. If the Germans build up their army, we might see if that stands true.
We'll see. Again, I think we've broken their military culture, and I don't know, but that's a different subject for a different day.
So, Larry, you go through all this stuff. I mean, you're helping the U.S. government, even when you're partaking in these, civilian jobs. They're still contracted out to the government. What you were there on January 6th?
Yes.
What were you paying attention to politically during this time? Because now, give me this if I'm right. When you're in the military, you can't really badmouth your boss. Is that the rule?
That's the rule. And I pretty much stayed out of partisan politics. I will tell you, I was always a conservative from the time that Iran took our hostages and Ronald Reagan ran in 1980 with, his campaign slogan of "Now is the time for strong leadership." I've always been a Republican. That's just who I am. But the military has a tradition of being nonpartisan, so you don't publicly really broadcast that. But I retired in 2014. So by the time I went to J6, I'm a retired military officer. I can say and do whatever I want as long as I don't do it in uniform. I can't attend a political rally in uniform either. And you can't bring discredit upon the military, like they would frown if I walked, in my service dress into a strip club. So, again, you've got to use some good judgment there.
What made you want to go to the rally on the 6th?
Well, all right. I'll
just be honest. Like, on my perspective, I was living in Colorado at the time, and I remember seeing all these Trump train posts on Facebook heading to DC for that rally. And I sat there and I thought, maybe I could take some time off of work and go to that. And I ultimately didn't do that because I'm poor. And so, and it worked. Looking back,
I wish I was poorer as well.
Yeah, damn it.
All right. So why did I go? All right. That is a great question, and it's one that's often asked. And my answer is because your vote was stolen. And I was certain of it then, and I'm more certain of it after 2024, even though I paid the price for it. It's funny. We always say, well, I'll stand up and do the right thing. Well, you better be ready, because sometimes doing the right thing is going to come with a heck of a cost. And it certainly did. So I read Ken Paxton's court case that he put before the Supreme Court that was joined by other states. I believe it's 17. It might have been 19 other states, stating that the Constitution was violated when these secretaries of states just unilaterally altered the voting rules so that the Democrats could have more mail-in ballots. Okay, it's clear cut in the Constitution, which, by the way, is the document that I swore an oath to uphold and defend. So we had a clear case that the Constitution was violated. Now, you're going to rightly say, well, isn't the Supreme Court the arbiter of the Constitution? And the answer to that is yes. They ducked and covered. To John Roberts' everlasting infamy, He failed to take up that case. If you want to read something, read Clarence Thomas's dissent as to why we shouldn't, why the Supreme Court should have picked up that case. And that'll tell you why I went there. It's all there in there. You've got the data dumps, you've got the mail fraud, everything that made me motivated to go there was in there, but it was more than that. I had watched testimony before the Pennsylvania and Michigan legislatures. I have read affidavits and cases filed by the GOP in the states against that. I was convinced that the election had been stolen, and I become more convinced after 2024. Just looking at the data empirically, and I did, from 1960 all the way through 2024, there was an average growth of about 4 million votes per election cycle. The one real deviation on that was from 1998 through 1992, when Bill Clinton got 12 million more votes than that. All right. From 2016 through 2020, we saw a 23 million vote delta. That's, I believe, 2 standard deviations beyond what is normal. That just doesn't happen in American politics. So all the statistical, mathematical data is there. The Supreme Court just ducked and covered. That being said, I didn't go there to break the law. I went there to peacefully protest. And the last time I checked, the last part of the First Amendment says to petition my government for redress. I have that right. I would argue I have that right more than most Americans because I fought for that right.
Well, and that's why I wanted to go over your history a little bit, Larry, because how January 6th protesters were portrayed were, especially for 4 years, where they were these violent, unhinged, radicalized group that assembled in DC. And you could see very clearly that that wasn't the case, but they were, and I pulled some clips too, but they hired ABC to run their January 6th committee to make it more television friendly and create an actual story. Like, that's how desperate these people were to maintain this narrative that you went there with ill intent to overthrow the government with no weapons. Did you bring weapons to overthrow the government?
Not a single thing. I was actually the pants that I normally wear, with that particular day would be a 511, pants. And I normally carry a pocket knife in the front right pocket because it fits in there. But I didn't even take that because I wanted no perception of having a weapon. Now, I did wear body armor. And you're saying, why did you wear body armor and a helmet? Because BLM had stabbed a Trump supporter in December. BLM or Antifa. Okay, so there were attacks that were going on against Trump supporters, and it seemed prudent to protect myself. It had nothing to do with the government. It had to do with the counter protesters that I expected to be there. Now, I will tell you that that's probably bad head work on my part. I think in the United States, if you're having to go to a location where you're having to wear body armor and a helmet, you probably shouldn't go to that location. So again, I'll take a little bit of a hit on that one.
That's BS. That's BS. They started this under Obama, I'm curious. I'm sure you were in the military, but you had to have seen this reporting where they would set up free speech zones, and then when they wanted the free speech zones became inconvenient, then they just they'd run was it the water machine against them, or they do the sound machine against them, and This was 2013, 2014, they were doing this. And I just remember thinking, what America is this, where we have to be zoned off for, free speech? It's just a very,
Well, I absolutely agree with you. To me, the whole country is a free speech zone. It's kind of like, when somebody says, well, where's your permit to carry a weapon? My answer is the Second Amendment is my permit to carry a weapon. So, but getting back to, I totally agree with you. So, I went to the Ellipse that day to listen to the president speak. I got up early, I say 6, thinking that I would be first in line. No, you needed to be probably 3 hours earlier to get to actually be close to the president. My guess, and again, I'm not a crowd size guy, but I would agree that there was somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people there that day. It went from the Rose Garden on that side of the White House all the way past the George Washington Monument, and it was broad, deep, and tight. So again, there was a significant crowd there. When President Trump was finished speaking, the mayor of D.C. had not supplied enough porta potties that day, so I went out of my way to use the restroom and to grab a cup of coffee because it was a very, very bitterly cold day. So I'm very thankful that I did that, because by the time I got to the Capitol on January the 6th, all the ski fencing had been removed by an unindicted man. The Ray Epps breach team had done its job, and all of the bicycle racks were gone. And I walked straight up to the Capitol, right by 4 policemen in riot gear who said absolutely nothing to me, and right into open doors with an officer not saying a word.
Ray Epps, just for people who don't know, who are you referring to? Who is this guy?
He is a man that on the 5th of January told people to go into the Capitol. He is a man that on the 6th of January told people to go into the Capitol. He said something to a couple of guys, and then they started the initial breach. One of the things he said was, wait, we don't have enough people here yet. Then he sent a text message bragging to his, I believe, nephew, saying that I orchestrated that. It gets a little worse, too. He had clearly 8 men with him. And I say that because if you watch the movie, The War on Truth, it's probably the best J6 movie that talks about what you just said. The fact that the government has hid the truth and proposed or sent out only their narrative. But in the War on Truth, you see Ray Epps, once red smoke is popped, which is a military symbol for avalanche, which means to get out of the area. You see 4 men ahead of him, 4 men behind him with Ray Epps in the center, rapidly egressing the area. So there was also yellow smoke that day. There was a star cluster that went off on top of the Capitol. And all of these things coincided with significant events that day.
What is the significance of the yellow smoke?
Yellow smoke is just a signaling device on a military battlefield. Different smokes mean different things, different colored smokes. So the yellow smoke occurred right before the breach of the second bicycle line. The star cluster that went off on the east side of the Capitol, it was immediately followed by the breach on the east side of the Capitol. I was on the west, where Ashley Babbitt was eventually shot. So again, I'm seeing all of this military signaling. I didn't see this that day, but I've seen it in the War on Truth. And I'm telling you, there is a deeper story here that I'm hopeful we will actually get to the bottom of. In my own case, all right, once I walked into the Capitol, I didn't do anything you would be ashamed of, okay? I walked around. I picked up trash in the small rotunda. They said I went into Pelosi's office. I didn't do that. Then I went into the great rotunda, took some selfies, big shocker there. I was actually worried that we were going to knock off some statues because people were trying to climb on top of them and put MAGA hats on top of the statues in the great rotunda there. So then I walked down a set of stairs. I know, clown show. I walked down a set of stairs, and I saw a couple of guards guarding a door, and there was a crowd outside the doors and inside the doors, and the people inside were trying to convince these officers to open the doors. So I started on one side and I walked around the other. And in my video on LarryBrockJr.com, Patriot Pilot Speaks, you can see me physically step on one set of flex cuffs and then a second pair. And I picked them both up. All right. Don't believe me. Believe your own eyes by going to the website and looking at the video. So I picked up those flex cuffs. I wished I just stuffed them in my jacket, but I didn't. I just carried them around with me. Now, I walked upstairs towards the Senate, and I saw a man in black chasing another man in a coat and tie. And then there was a demonstrator right in front of me that started chasing after the man in the coat and tie. I grabbed him and stopped him. And then I got in between the man in black and the guy in the coat and tie and said, stop, we don't do this. All right. So the man in the coat and tie was Capitol Police Officer Nairobi Timberlake. And he testified in my trial that I used my command presence to protect him and his partner. Now, you didn't really hear that on CBS, did you? Or ABC or NBC? No, of course not. So from there, I went into the Senate gallery, told people not to destroy anything. walked around, grabbed a set of keys, tried to unlock a door. Didn't work, so set the keys back down, didn't kick the door, didn't try and force it, didn't do anything. I wish I hadn't tried to open that door, but I did, just being fully honest with you. Then I walked downstairs and I saw a man sitting in Vice President Pence's chair. So I walked onto the Senate floor. Again, you can see all of this on my side, and told him to get out of the Vice President's chair, that it didn't belong to us. It belonged to him. And eventually kind of controlled the people. You know, there was talk of people, let's destroy the place. And I'm like, absolutely not. There was a guy that wanted to steal something from Senator Romney's desk. I told him, no, just take a picture of it. You know, honestly, that was the extent there. The crazy thing is I never ran into the QAnon shaman, but he was there. I never saw him. Then I went to go and leave. And, you know, just like in the QAnon shaman video on Tucker, I walked up to a Capitol police officer and said, hey, I'd like to leave. Can you tell me where to go? And he goes, no, but I'll walk with you. So he and I walked and talked just like you and I would down any hallway in America. He escorted me to a line of police, and they were guarding an entrance. And there was a man that was shirtless, and he's confronting the police aggressively. When I'm finally cleared to go through the line of police, you see me put my arms around the guy that's shirtless and say, hey, bud, not today. Let's go ahead and leave. And you see us walk off together. Now, for those heinous crimes, and, you know, when I say that, you know, you need to picture the prosecuting attorney from, what's that movie with, I'll think of it later. But
In the middle of the night.
You know, the heinous, you know, the real Southern judge and the New York lawyer. Anyway.
My Cousin Vinny?
That one. Yeah. So
okay.
For those heinous crimes that I just described, the judge sentenced me to 2 years in prison. Now, the government charged me with felony.
Let's back up here, right? So is this immediately like that you walk past the line, you're cuffed, or you go home?
No, I fly home the next day, and I'm going to be honest with you. As soon as I got to my hotel room and saw the way it was being portrayed on the TV, I knew it was going to be bad. And then, you know, when Mitch McConnell came out and the coordination of the word insurrection was used, I knew it was going to be really bad. So I got home on the 7th. I went and saw my son. And then that night I started receiving death threats from the American left, who had somehow identified me, as well as, you know, many requests for interviews from tons of agencies that I would never speak to, like the New York Slimes, you know, the Washington Compost, to quote the great Rush Limbaugh. You know, I won't talk to leftist media, period. There's no point in it. They're just going to lie. Don't do it. What
was their approach to you? Like how many?
You know, we just no. They just, you know, we just want to get your story out. The usual lies. All they want is to spin it, you know, that direction. Again, was smart enough not to talk to them. I did actually talk to one person, and I told the story, but again, then he edited it the way they want. So I gave them a chance. They failed. You know, I'm only required to turn the cheek once, right? I mean, I know you're supposed to turn it, you know, 70 times 7, but that's a different story. All right.
No, just once. Once is good. Plus those death threats, what are they going to be? I'm going to get you with my plastic.
Yeah, no. It was, I know where you live. We're going to come and shoot you. And then, you know, some of them even had my address. So, so that following Friday morning, I got up, and again, I'm your standard Texan. I have a few guns. I'm not going to tell the federal government how many I have. But I have a few, and I have a lot of ammunition. So I took all of that and conveniently lost it in a lake somewhere, and developed a bad case of amnesia that didn't clear up until the day I was pardoned. So I hate it when that happens.
No, me too. That's the worst.
But, you know, what I did was deny the FBI the photo opportunity of taking my guns and not giving them back to me and laying them all out and make it look like I'm some drug dealer or something.
We're jumping ahead, because I understand.
Well, I'm still on January 8th now.
So on January 8th, but you're back. You're getting rid of everything because you've already been identified in a day.
I know what's coming. I truly do. Now, what I'm hopeful of at this point is that because my actions were entirely peaceful and I did nothing that was violent, that they just want to talk to me. I had no idea that the Biden DOJ was going to turn this into the politicized witch hunt that it became, that they were going to treat American conservatives in the same way that Nazi Germany initially treated its Jewish population. Yeah. All right. And it's only the Second Amendment and the fact that Americans won't let them get that far that kept them from putting us on trains and sending us to camps. Because if they could have gotten away with it, they would have definitely killed you. And I would argue that in our society, when you take away a man's right to live, when you besmirch his reputation to the point where he can't get a job, where you ostracize him completely from his community, and you do everything else that our government did to us, you are really trying to destroy that man. As a matter of fact, 5 January 6ers took their lives due to the government, and that's just the ones we know about, due to government actions, to destroy us.
I mean, yeah, that makes total sense. You strip them, in a sense, bare naked, and then they just have you think you are the problem, and then they just hope that you take care of their problem for them. And I mean, that is such BS. I mean, they tore everybody down and put them on that virtual train pretty much, and then some unfortunately took their own lives because the government tore them down to nothing, and there was no way to rebuild themselves. And that's a fucking shame.
You're absolutely right, Chris. Now, I'll give you just an example of one of them. This is how evil Matthew Graves, Greg Rosen, and Merrick Garland were. So there was a J6er by the name of Matthew Perna, and he was under a lot of pressure, and he took a plea deal on the 1512 C2 felony, the one that was eventually overturned by SCOTUS. The government had said he would have 2 to 3 years. So he takes the plea deal, he pleads guilty, and he's awaiting sentencing. After they took the plea deal from him, and he's thinking 2 to 3 years, they tried to add a terrorism enhancement on it, which would have taken it to 6 to 8 years. So after you've already waived your right to a trial, pled guilty, imagine them changing the terms to make your sentence 4 times higher. Matthew couldn't live with that. The judge didn't stop the government from doing it. And so Matthew Perna took his own life that day. So this is a tragedy, I'm going to tell you, I think there are far more J6ers that thought about killing themselves. It went through my head for about a second, and then I decided not to do it because of the selfishness of the act, how it would kill my parents and really hurt my children. So I couldn't do it, but I feel a lot of empathy for Matthew Perna and his family for what they did. And honestly, there are laws that we can use, and I am pursuing this with the new Department of Justice, criminal actions against the judges, the prosecutors, and the FBI agents that did this. But getting back on story, I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted to say something about that too. Just I don't know if you're religious at all, but there is a story in the Bible that talks where Jesus, right before he's put to death, the night before he's put to death on charges of blasphemy, which is the worst crime that someone could commit against their God. And it bothers Jesus so much that, he cries tears of blood, and God sends an angel to comfort him. And for these people, they went there with innocent, it wasn't malice. We were told they were going there with malice. They're going to overthrow the government. They're horrible people. They're unhinged, and they were just good people. And because their faces got identified, their families lives got ruined. Their potential for anything they dreamed of, for the future, momentarily, it got ruined. And not momentarily, like that lives with you. That experience lives with you for the rest of your life.
It truly does. There are J6ers that are struggling to find jobs because of the government narrative, because their media symbiote blasted us the way they did. So, just my own life. I was a 737 captain. I had a great job. I went from being, a federal flight deck officer at American Airlines, which means I was a pilot authorized to carry a gun on a civilian airplane to protect the civilians, to a designated threat of air piracy and terrorism. So I was placed on the Quiet Skies terrorist watch list. The FAA revoked my pilot's licenses. All right. And obviously I lost pre-check and global entry and all the other little nice features. And I didn't get those back until recently. And I had to petition the government to get them back once I was pardoned and once all charges were dropped. But I'm getting way ahead of myself there. All right. So on January the 10th, the FBI called me at about noon. All right. And said they wanted to talk to me. Now, keep in mind, that was a Sunday. They admitted in my trial that they had my number on Friday, but they didn't call me. And that's because they wanted a SWAT raid. They wanted a media hit on me. You're saying, how do you know that? My nephew saw them staging at an elementary school near where my father was, because once I got death threats, I left my first floor apartment building and went to my father's house. He lives inside a gated community. So I knew I would be safe there. So I don't know why they didn't come and get me, but they didn't. So they called me at noon. I finished having lunch with my mom, and then I was dropping a friend off, and my lawyer called me, and we had set up a meeting with them at 4:30 at my attorney's office, because I thought they told me, again, the first of the FB lies, but they lied to me and told me they just wanted to talk to me. So about 2:30, my lawyer called me and said, hey, they just issued a warrant for your arrest. You need to go and turn yourself in. So I was supposed to meet them at 4:30 at the Grapevine City Police Station. All right. And I showed up at 3:30, ruining their plans because they had a media spectacle planned. They had a full SWAT team waiting for me there, even though I'm voluntarily surrendering myself. Again, they wanted the narrative of the violent insurrectionists being captured and curtailed by the brave FBI.
They thought you were a prime target, military man. You fit all their checklists. You were their DEI checklist of the person. Yeah. They wanted to.
Exactly. I'm from the South. Okay. I'm Anglo. I'm tall. I'm bald. Yeah, they hate me, and I'm military. So yes, the DEI FBI hates me with a deep purple passion.
You were the show pony of the J6ers. You I mean, pretty much. I mean,
yeah. Wow. Yeah. So all right, that's funny. All right, so so they arrested me, and the FBI immediately tried to talk to me. I, of course, have a pretty good brain, and I said, "Hey, I'm happy to talk to you guys once I have legal representation." So that ended that conversation. Spent the night in jail, and then the next morning, when I was being taken over for arraignment, the FBI lied to me 2 more times. They told me that I was looking at 40 years in prison, 2 20-year felony prison charges. And they also told me that I would have legal representation prior to my arraignment. Now, I did at my arraignment, but I'd never talked to the guy. So that's really not representation at all. That was just an excuse to start the process going. So they threw me in a local jail that has a federal inmate population in it, in a town near here. And I spent 4 days in solitary confinement, which was kind of a good training program for what was coming. All right. So, I talked to you about the one time I potentially thought about suicide. They never let me out of that cell for those 4 days, with one exception. They allowed me to walk around an empty indoor basketball court where all it had were 2 goals, basketball goals. But there was a conveniently left 13-gallon trash bag right there on the floor. No trash cans in sight, no trash cans in the hallways. And I've often wondered if they left that trash bag there for me to grab it, take it back to my cell, put it over my head, and smother myself. Like I said, you ask if I'm a religious man, I am a born-again Christian. I serve a risen Savior, and I'm not Catholic, but there is something to that being an unforgivable sin in my mind. So I would never do that because I love my parents and my children, and don't want them to suffer. And it just strikes me as evil. So after that 4 days, the government wanted to keep me in jail, even though I had done nothing violent. And they knew by that point that I had picked those flex cuffs up there, but they still told the American public on the 14th, U.S. Attorney Jay Weimer lied in federal court by saying that I had brought those flex cuffs to arrest or to grab a congressman or Vice President Pence and hang him. Now, again, let's get back to J6. Remember those gallows? Do you know they're not even looking for the people that built the gallows? What does that tell you? Do you know they've stopped looking for the people that had pipe bombs there or that put pipe bombs there? What does that tell you? Okay, if you built a gallows, if it was really people that had built it, they would be searching and scouring the ends of the earth for them. If they
100%.
didn't know who that pipe bomber was, they would continue searching. Okay, whistleblowers come forward. They know exactly who it is.
They found you in a day.
Exactly. 2 days. 2 days. They knew who I was Friday.
Right. Yeah.
The press found out who I was on the 7th. Now, so again, so on the 14th, the judge, because I only had misdemeanor charges at the time, releases me and puts me on house arrest. So I was under house arrest for 7 months. So I had a Biden manacle, a GPS tracker on my ankle. I call it a Biden manacle. All right. And I was not allowed to go anywhere with the exception of work, which I'd lost my job. All right. Or to the doctor's office or to religious services. And they let me like once a week because I have elderly parents go to the store for them. Other than that, I was stuck at home. Now I was in the process of learning to do a separate job or a second job because I had so much time off as a pilot. So that second job that I had scheduled training classes for became my primary occupation. But I lost that license eventually when I got put into prison. So that was January of 2021. I got off of house arrest in August of 2021. Now, I did not go to trial until 2023. And you're saying, well, what about a speedy trial? My lawyer and I made the decision to waive my right to a speedy trial so that the evidence would have more time to get out, so that the fervor, the anti-J6 fervor would die down a little bit. I will tell you, I consider it a gift of God to have had the counsel that I did. He was not a public defender, but he did a lot of pro bono work on my case because I ran out of money pretty quick. And that his name was Charles Burnham. He was an outstanding attorney. As a matter of fact, he was eventually cited by the judge as having the correct interpretation, the same one the Supreme Court put forth of the 1512C2 law that the judge found me guilty on. So the judge was basically admitting that my attorney was smarter than him, which is true. All right, so
who was the judge, Larry?
My judge was Judge John D. Bates, which Representative Andy Ogles has written up articles of impeachment on because of his actions against the Trump administration. I have written Representative Ogles and offered to provide testimony in support of Judge Bates' impeachment. All right, so I didn't go to trial until November of 2022. The only thing really of note in the trial, I opted for a bench trial because you cannot get a fair trial in D.C. Again, not a single J6er was found innocent via jury trial in Washington, D.C., and only one J6er was found not guilty after a bench trial. All right, so that tells you how stacked the odds were, okay, against us. The D.C. circuit must be abolished. Mm-hmm. All right, but let's back up. So I'm in trial. There's really nothing of note. You know, the judge is basically rubber stamping everything the government agrees to. All right. And then they literally read part of the Declaration of Independence into evidence against me. You know, I'm not kidding. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of those ends, it is their right to alter or abolish it. I had posted that on Facebook, and they took great offense to that. So in the nation's capital, in front of the Great Seal of the United States, an American district judge approved by the Senate with a U.S. attorney and the FBI agent was reading into evidence against an American military officer the Declaration of Independence. That's who the Biden administration is. They are nothing but worthless communist swine. All right, I digress. So eventually I was found guilty, and they moved to sentence me in February of 2023. Now, the guideline, the sentencing guideline that the judge had based off of the 1512C2 felony and the misdemeanors I was convicted of, entering a restricted area, parading and picketing, disturbing the peace, and then disrupting the movement of an officer in the Capitol. Now, just if I could talk about that, my attorney asked, what did Mr. Brock do that was disorderly? Disorderly conduct was one of them. And the judge said, well, he didn't do anything, but he was part of a crowd that was disorderly. So under the raindrop theory, he's guilty. So guilt by association now in the United States. Nice. All right. And then my attorney asked, evidence shows that Mr. Brock never impeded an officer. How's he guilty of that? Well, I'm sure he did at some point.
Oh, shit.
Oh, so we can just find you guilty now without evidence, much less the felony, which was eventually overturned by the Supreme Court. So the sentencing guideline was 24 to 30 months. The government was asking for 6 years. They wanted to crucify me. But because of, the mission that I described to you earlier and the bravery of a U.S. Air Force Major General writing about that mission, as well as some other good things that I've done to help people throughout my life, the judge gave me 2 years. Now, again, that's 2 years for protecting a policeman, 2 years for doing nothing but walk in the building, 2 years for keeping the peace. So how am I feeling about my government right now? All right.
Oh,
So
hot as a motherfucker. I mean, at that point, you might as well have taken a shit in Pelosi's desk. I mean, that is insane.
well, the guy that put his feet up on the desk got 6 years. His name's Richard Bigo Barnett. So it's a good guy.
Damn.
I mean, it had to have been a shocking moment for you to realize how rigged the judicial system
Yeah.
It honestly was. I will tell you that I have lost complete and total faith in the judicial system. And that's why, there's an organization down here called the Texans for Judicial Accountability that is trying to bring more options, against these judges. And again, that has to happen on a federal level too, because the problem we have is we can only impeach them. And that's just, that takes too much of the American government's time. We need some method to censor or remove these judges short of impeachment. But that's a different discussion. So I will tell you, it really hits you the first time you read the words, the United States of America versus Larry Brock. I mean, that was just a horrible feeling for a man that had offered as much as I had to the country. And so I had to report to prison on Memorial Day of 2023. And so at the time, they were putting J6ers pretty much as far away as they were legally allowed to put us. Now, another thing they did to us is they designated us as domestic terrorists. So that made it to where we couldn't go to camps where you have more freedom, a little bit less prison-ish, if you get it, to where we had to go to lows. All right. So it increased our threat level because the higher you get, the more your life is actually in danger inside a prison. All right. And it made it to where we couldn't hold certain jobs that paid better or anything like that. And it also put scrutiny on our email, limiting how often we could communicate and other measures. So that was just another little thing that the BOP did to take, to additionally punish us. Now, also, I think I've told you already, they pulled my licenses from me. They put me on a terrorist watch list. And I don't know for certain that we're off all of those lists. One of the things I'm doing is working with an outstanding young freshman congressman. All right. His chief of staff is doing great work to help me get off of all of these different lists. There's the Terrorism Screening Center data set that the FBI has. And that ties into the National Vehicle Registry to where if I'm stopped by an officer and I'm still in that data set, they may still approach my car thinking I'm a terrorist, even though I'm not. So even though I have a full pardon now, we could still be on that list. They could have put us on the Interpol terrorism list to where I can't go now to Canada or any other country because they think I'm a convicted felon or a terrorist. So we've got a lot of things we've got to get off of. The right to buy a gun through the National Crime Information Center. There are a ton of other lists inside the government that I have to make sure that my fellow J6ers are off of. But I want to go back to prison for a second.
Larry, I mean, it's very Nazi-ish.
It never stops.
Yeah.
So, all right. I say that it is coming to an end, but the process is long and arduous. So I'm flashing forward too far ahead because you're not going to believe the next things I'm about to tell you.
Well, I was just sort of curious, you get this judgment put on you, and now you're going to a federal prison. What's your feeling as you're going through there for the first time? I mean, you could have never imagined here 3 months ago, 3 months ago, not even. It's like how long is the turnaround from your licenses being removed to you going through the gates of prison for the first time?
Well, my licenses were removed in March of 2021, but I was convicted in November of 22, and then in February of 23, I was sentenced. So it was a 3-month delay to actually enter the prison. But yes, I have elderly parents; they couldn't drive me there, and so I rented a car and drove it to the airport, and then I Ubered to prison.
Oh, shit.
And so you should have seen the look on the Uber driver's face when I was like, "Yeah, you're dropping me off at prison, bud."
Don't expect a tip or 5 stars there, guy.
I never looked to see if he gave me a 1-star review.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm wondering. So you're getting dropped off in front of the prison, right?
Yes.
Like every day in your mind, at least how I'm tracking is like, if this sack of shit stays in office for another run, or it's Kamala, whoever it is, like you're hoping and praying, like everybody else that is involved in this, Trump or somebody on the right, we've got to get in there to stand a fighting chance, or we are literally just going to disappear. Because I feel like that's almost what they're setting all you up for, is just the disappearance into the depths of God knows what, with putting you in those high risk prisons and everything else. I mean, that would be the hardest thing, is knowing how they cheated with that election so bad that they did. I mean, 81 million votes to now, oh shit, we're these pieces that are just going to be locked away and the key's going to be thrown forever, because if they cheated one election, would have stopped it. See, that's where my brain goes. And that would be terrible to take that mindset into prison, because I'd be like, I can't do this.
I mean, I knew there was an end for me because, my sentence was only 2 years. There were people that had 7, 8, 10, 23 years in one case. So, yeah, it was imperative that Trump won. But let me tell you a couple of stories about inside prison. So I will tell you that, J6ers in there were, I'm going to say, this is going to sound wrong, but almost like celebrity inmates. Meaning the inmates knew we really didn't belong there. And so as long as we played the game and, did what was right to do, never rat anybody out, never, turn a blind eye to things that are being done that they shouldn't do, which is what you had to do in order to survive. You were mainly left alone by the inmates. I never had any problems with the inmates, except one guy that I had to confront because he was sexually harassing a J6er, not me, but another guy. And I made sure I put a stop to that. So in prison, the first month I decided that I wanted to teach mathematics. And I actually, what they did is they had me teaching one-on-one guys that had failed the GED. So I will tell you that is the only thing that I'm proud of inside prison that I was able to do. And that is 5 inmates that had failed the GED math portion multiple times. I was 5 for 5. So I got those guys through, and the looks of happiness on their face, for having succeeded. And all they really needed was someone to take the time and work with them, in the way that they needed to be worked with to get them through that. But so that was a good thing. But let's back up just a second. So I had a social media presence on X. And so I sent out messages about my imprisonment, and I always said I was a political prisoner inside the Springfield Gulag, and I'm not deviating from that to this day. So in June of 2023, J6 Granny Pam Hemphill turned cloak on President Trump and started making statements about, well, he told us to do it, and he's responsible, and he caused the insurrection and all this other stuff. So unfortunately for me, I'm the senior ranking military officer amongst J6 prisoners. Now, in the American Fighting Man's Code of Conduct, which I learned at the Air Force Academy, which was beat into me in survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, Article 4 of the American Fighting Man's Code of Conduct says, if I am senior, I will take command. I am senior, I took command. Article 5, When questioned, should I become a prisoner of war, I will make no oral or written statements disloyal to my country and its allies or harmful to their cause. So I issued guidance that went out throughout the prison system as the senior ranking PPOW, political prisoner of war, to not make any statements disloyal to President Trump, to not give the Democrats the political propaganda talking points that they wanted, to remain faithful to the American people and firm in the belief that they would liberate you from your unjust captivity. For those statements and for saying that we were all part of the 5th Allied PPOW wing, okay, they accused me of trying to start a prison gang. One officer equated it with the Crips and Bloods. I'm not making that up. He literally said that, and I laughed in his face. All right. And he also, they said that you're communicating with other prisoners, which is not allowed as well. So they threw me in the hole. Segregated housing unit is the euphemism for it, for 127 straight days, which is against American prison policy, which is 30 days. It's against the Mandela rule that our prisoners are supposed to, or our prisons are supposed to comply with, which says no more than 15 days. But it was 127 straight days of isolation.
And if you don't want to discuss it, that's fine too. I'm just curious, like, how did you cope? Because do you get like 1 hour a day to walk the yard and then you're back in the hole? Is that how that?
So 5 days a week, we were allowed into a cage 1 hour a day to walk back and forth, 17 paces one direction, 18 the other. So yeah, that's all I did for 127 straight days.
And how big is your hole? How big is the cell?
5 by 8.
Shit.
Yeah. Toilet, 2 steel bunks. All right. A pillow. I'm going to call it a pad with some cushioning in it, but don't think of it as a mattress because that's not it. 2 blankets, 2 sheets, and a book. That's all you're allowed.
Lights on all the time?
Oh, yeah. The lights were on at 6 o'clock, whether you wanted them on or not, and they were off at 9 o'clock at night, whether you wanted them on or off. So that was just how they did that.
Could they talk to you?
They talked through a little food chute. Yeah, you could yell across to other people, but honestly, how did I cope? A lot of books, the Bible. Again, I was fortunate to go to a prison in a red state. The guards gave me a few leeways, but there were 5 particular officers inside that prison that had it in for me. The captain, Justin Leonowitz, who calls himself Reaper, who was at a prison that was actually shut down for prison abuse. All right. Then you had Lieutenant, I'm sorry, I can't think of his name right now, but another lieutenant, Tim Conifer was his name, that told me that if I kept identifying officers by name that were abusing me, he was going to make it worse for me, which I was already in the hole. So what they were planning to do is what's called 4-pointing. So they were going to tie me spread eagle to a cement block and keep me there for hours. That's what he was threatening to do because I was putting the officer's name in letters home. His name's Tim Conifer. And then there was Officer Alicia DiOrio.
Were those letters getting home?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. So, yeah, I want to file federal mail theft charges against an officer. Now, it's one particular officer. His name was Ray Getman that caused all the problems. This little man, he needs to be eliminated from the federal service in all capacities because what he did was immoral, illegal, and unethical. So it was him and his partner, Gary Krebs. So, all right, while I was in there, they put a mentally unstable man in prison in my cell with me. He walked into my cell and said, "I speak with demons." I was like, well, I speak with the other side, so this ought to be interesting. So, immediately started praying. Now, he was about 5'6", 5'7", but he was just nuts. I'll make a really long story short, but they kept him in there with me for about 23 days. I know that because they move you every 18 days. And so, then you're kind of losing track of time. Eventually he threatened to kill himself and they finally took him out and he never came back. And I don't know what happened to him, but I think that was their first attempt. Now, they also kept me in prison because they were trying to transfer me to a prison in Terre Haute called the Communications Management Unit, which is where they put all the Islamic terrorists that the United States has captured. For example, the Somali pirate that you know, the
Captain Phillips.
Captain Phillips.
I am captain now.
Look at me.
He's in that prison. Yes.
Yes.
So he
You guys pen pals?
no, but they tried to move me to that prison. So what they wanted, and this is the way guards kill people in prisons, they will put you in with people that they know are going to be violent. For example, the captain that I brought up, Justin Leonowitz, while he was a lieutenant at USP Thompson, his unit, he wasn't directly responsible, but his officers were, placed a Jewish man in with two skinheads, and they beat the Jewish man to death. That was one of the things that contributed to closure. So they were trying to transfer a decorated military officer who had fought the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Iraq in and amongst them. And there had been a killing, Muslim on Christian, in that prison a few years prior. So this was not a safe place for me to go. They tried twice to send me there. Okay, that's their second murder attempt. But it gets even better. What?
Who's they?
So, they being the guards that I just mentioned to you. All right, that set of 5. Now, because they couldn't send me to Al-Qaeda, when I eventually got out of isolation, because they couldn't keep me there anymore legally, all right, they put Al-Qaeda sleeping less than 6 feet from me. We had an Al-Qaeda terrorist named Abid Nasir, look him up, come, and they put him sleeping 6 feet from me. The only reason they moved him is their own guards raised so much hell with them that they had to move him. Hell with them to move him. But yeah, it was 5 sleepless nights knowing that they had put Al-Qaeda sleeping right next to me. How's that? Damn. So those are just a few things that they did while I was in there. Now, they also restricted my communications. They cut off all mail with the exception of family. You know, it was an experience made much harder on me because of my political convictions and because of my unwavering loyalty to President Trump, and because I remain committed to the fact that I was a political prisoner inside an illegitimate and criminal government's gulag system.
Were you ever approached and asked to, you know, hey man, if you just take it all back, we'll get better?
No, they like,
you were convinced to just, they were going to take you out.
Yeah, they wanted me. They didn't even offer me a plea deal. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't have taken it anyway. And inside the prison, the only time they offered me to rat was on my way out the door. And I just looked at him, and it was the same guy that had caused all the problems. I just looked at him and laughed and walked out. So I'm that's not who I am as a person. So I got out of prison on June the 4th. And if you go to my X profile, you'll see what I actually said on the day that I got out. Now, I will tell you, I practiced that speech for about 3 months, and it grew from 30 seconds to about 3 minutes. There was a lot of input into that speech. We considered it a home run if 10,000 people watched it. And if you look at it, 2 million people have seen it.
Can we play it?
Absolutely.
I thank God that I've had the opportunity to serve my country under such trying and difficult circumstances. For 372 days, I have been a political prisoner of this administration. Although I have many things to say about my time and treatment inside the Springfield Gulag, that will wait. The first thing I must do is give thanks to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for my deliverance and liberation. To every American that prayed for me or wrote to me, thank you. Your support meant everything, especially in the dark days when they threw me in the hole, especially when they were trying to have me killed. I ask every American to reflect on the fact that just 4 short years ago, we all believed we enjoyed the full protection of the Bill of Rights, the right of free speech, the right to assemble, the right to a speedy trial, and the right to a trial by a jury of our peers. But now, as many in the minority community already knew, those rights just don't exist anymore. Instead, we have FBI censorship and propaganda, warrantless surveillance, and indefinite pretrial and post-conviction detention of American citizens. And worst of all, the The fundamental tenet of American jurisprudence, equal justice under law, has been corrupted. And now we have a two-tiered system of justice, complete with political show trials, ranging from the former president to a common man like me. In the face of this banality of evil, you're right to ask, what can one man or one woman do? Although you must continue to pray. To merely pray while Americans are being shipped to gulags as prisoners of conscience, well, that just mocks God and dishonors the sacrifice of our founding fathers and the shed blood of patriots who enshrined our rights in our sacred Constitution. So I'm asking you today, please call your congressmen and senators and demand that they live up to the gospel they profess to believe. Demand that they not only proclaim liberty to the captives, but that they use the full power of the legislature, their voice, their vote, and most importantly, the budget to set at liberty those who are oppressed. And if they will not do this, vote them out, every last one of them. Never again should there be a political prisoner in the United States. Finally, in the words of a truly great man, a man who was also a prisoner of his government, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. God bless you, your families, and God bless the United States of America.
You know, I mean, it's just we can't imagine what you went through. You know, like you can tell us these things, but you know, I study a lot about the Soviet Union. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and so of course that was persona non grata in some of these countries like Germany and the Soviet Union. And they talked about how they would, you know, hunt them down, capture them, you know, find, you know, religious material and use that in court cases. And you just never saw your uncle again. You just never saw him again. And some of these people, it wasn't until 91 that they found out their grandma was on a collective farm in the middle of Russia. And when these stories started coming out, it's infuriating because that's not America, or that's not what we were told America was. And how did it get to this point? Beneath, that's what infuriates me too. Is like it was so quick. It felt like how was the system so corrupted to such a decentralized level that it was able to operate that smoothly to silence you? I mean, it was within 3 days. You know, within 2 days they were on you.
That's what really, I think, scares me the most. We had a glimpse of how easy it would be to establish fascism inside the United States. And for all the left's talk about us being fascists, it is 180 out, as we know. What scares me the most is we had FBI agents, all of whom have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, trample on the First Amendment rights. I had a federal judge dismiss my Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights. You know, right to a fair trial. There is no fair trial in D.C. You know, right to a speedy trial. I told you I waived that, but there were J6ers that didn't waive that, and they just kept doing whatever they wanted to do. The judge actually kept me in prison during this time where I won an appeal. Congress changed the law to let me out sooner, and eventually I won the felony appeal, and he still didn't resentence me. He got his full 2-year sentence, even though my sentencing guideline went to 0 to 6 months. So you ask how it could happen. That's how it could happen. When men and women start ignoring the Constitution, when we start yielding on these small rights, when we allow free speech zones instead of the whole country being a free speech zone, when we start allowing restrictions on our right to bear arms, when we start letting them just nibble and peck at the Constitution and our rights, you know, that's when they're going to take that mile. And that's why the FBI has to be purged of all of these agents that did this. I had a BOP guard, Bureau of Prisons guard, tell me, I completely agree with you. I agree with everything you're doing, and it's a shame you're in here. And I'm like, then why are you allowing them to imprison me? Why are you standing by and doing this in a system that is doing this to your fellow Americans? And he said to me, I have a paycheck. I have a family. I have to support. And I understand that, okay? I understand that as a man that needs to provide. But you need to understand that the guards in Nazi Germany said the same thing when they were at Auschwitz. I have a job. I have a need to serve the state. Okay, that's how it happens. And we were on that slope. We were so close to the left achieving its goal of communism. Kamala was already talking about censoring Twitter. You know, the FBI, the people she was going to put in her Department of Justice would have been far worse than what we suffered under Merrick Garland, Matthew Graves, and Greg Rosen. So I got out of prison on June 4th, and I went to a halfway house for a month, and then I was under home arrest for 2 months. Now, I believe that the best thing I could do to help all of my fellow J6 prisoners, if you will, the men that were in the men and women in the PPOW wing with me, was to help President Trump get elected. That was the quickest way of serving the most people. So I called, the Republican Party in Texas and said, I'd like to work as a voter registrar. Well, guess what you can't do as a convicted felon in Texas? You can't register votes. They wanted me to be a precinct chair because of where I was living, but I couldn't change my voting address because I was a convicted felon. Now, in July, the Supreme Court issued a decision overturning the only felony I was convicted of. The government agreed in August that felony should be vacated. So the judge signed off on that waiver, right? He vacated that immediately, right? No, he didn't do it. So he kept me a convicted felon so I couldn't vote for President Trump.
The whole time?
The whole time. He never wavered on that until 1 week before President Trump was inaugurated. He agreed to vacate the felony sentence 1 week prior to inauguration. So and honestly, I've got to, that was a relief to me. And the reason I say that is if President Trump had just commuted the sentences, I knew I was no longer a convicted felon. So that was a slight relief. So here's the crazy thing. Now, they kept that hanging over my head. Gregory Rosen, who was the DC attorney in charge of the Capitol siege, division, told my attorney personally, I want Colonel Brock to go through life as a convicted felon. They plan to retry me under the 1512C2 using the Ketanji Brown Jackson watered down variant of the majority opinion. Now, it wouldn't have flown, I don't think, but it's a DC judge, so who knows? So they wanted further expense, further costs to continue to hurt me. And there was a possibility that if I was found guilty, they could resentence me to more time in jail. Now, yes, we could have made arguments about double jeopardy all day long. But again, having watched the judge dismiss, selective prosecution, dismiss, motions to, change venue, I have no hope for our justice system in Washington, D.C., and honestly, not at all after talking to prisoners inside the system there. So President Trump was the one thing I knew I could do is I have a little bit of a gift of gab. I think I can speak pretty well. So I started a space on Twitter with the objective being to support President Trump, to blunt the left's attacks on him, and to tell the American people the truth about J6. I started talking immediately. Now, I don't focus on J6 that much in my space. Occasionally, I'll talk about it, but it's pretty rare because there's other things to discuss.
Right, yeah.
So, but I believe that the American body politic had the poison of the insurrection narrative injected into it by the left and their media allies. And the antidote to that poison is J6ers telling the truth, which is why I still always take the opportunity to tell the truth about what happened to me. Because if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. And you say it can't? Yes, sir, it can. I guarantee you they can take the smallest thing and they will figure it. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. I know that's a Russian KGB guy that said that, but it definitely applied to Merrick Garland.
That's what we're dealing with.
Yes, sir.
Today, that's what we're dealing with. That's what Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, I want to give them, a pass. I mean, how she handled the whole situation with Epstein was horrible. But I want to give her a pass on not being able to get the information because she is dealing with nobody that wants to work with her. Kash Patel has nobody that he does, but you got to figure out who's lying to you, who's trying to subvert you to keep their position so they can screw you later. This is not a simple walk-in day one situation here. And it is entrenched all throughout the judicial system, all through the FBI. And and of course the CIA has its own issues too. But
no, you're absolutely right. That was horribly handled. I still have hope that President Trump will follow through on the promise to deliver, all the Epstein victims to us. But it's like you said. Kash Patel has only been in power. This is day 6 of him being the FBI director. Assistant Director Bongino. Was this day 1? I got to ask.
This is a genius idea with Bongino because he's been in, the public eye and he's had a lot of whistleblowers go through him. So he knows the backstories behind a lot of these people, and
Correct.
He can handpick who's going to uphold the Constitution and who's out there to run State Department errands. And
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, it's just a good move, as much as the left hates it, it's a genius move to bring him on because it's entrenched. It's everywhere.
I totally agree with you. I will tell you that, I view the entire thing as being about the truth. We demand the truth on, the Doge audits are whetting the American people's appetite for what else have they lied to us about? What else have they committed fraudulent acts or evidence, or fraud, waste, and abuse on? So I think it was actually really smart to unleash Elon first. And I think getting the Epstein list out, if she can actually get the evidence, will be a great thing to restore trust. And it would be even better if they perp walk a senator or a congressman that is guilty. It takes that. I think that has to happen for us to again believe that the words on the Supreme Court are true, equal justice under law. So, so what am I doing now? There's a couple of questions I'm going to answer before you ask them. My plan right now is I just got my licenses. Well, they're supposed to be issued this week. I should have my pilot's licenses back. So as soon as I get them, I'm going to go take an FAA Class 1 physical. You have to have the licenses before you can take the physical. So it's a process. And then once I'm certain I can fly again, I'm going to ask my boss for my old job. I'm also pursuing other things. And one of the things I want to do is I want to run for government inside the state of Texas. I want to run for state representative. It's a start. Eventually, I'd like to be a U.S. congressman, all right, or higher. But let's do my job for the people of Texas first, and kind of wet my teeth, if you will, on that. We say all the time, we want one honest man in Washington, somebody with integrity to actually be there. Okay, well, integrity is about 3 things, really. Okay, it's about bravery. All right, it's about a sense of duty. Okay, and it's about loyalty. And I've done all 3 of those things. I've demonstrated to you that I'm brave. I've demonstrated that I'm loyal to the Constitution, even at great personal expense. And I have a sense of duty to do what is right, even when it's not easy. So I think I will be a good candidate, and I'm working very hard to secure the support of the Texas Republican Party. I'm talking with a lot of people there, and I'm also working grassroots. Now, it's an interesting thing when you actually start getting involved grassroots politically. You never know where your reach might go. And also because of the show that I have on X, I'll give you an example. Went to the federal prison on Liberation Day, January the 20th, where the J6ers were getting out. And there was a lady that was in prison there. Jaleese Middleton was her name. And I was there with her daughter. And another patriot, and we were trying to get them out. So we had a guard come up to us and say, "Hey, it's a federal holiday. She's not getting out today." And I'm like, "The law says that they have to be out by midnight tonight, so I'm pretty sure they're getting out." And he's like, "I'm pretty sure they're not. And give me your ID." And I'm like, "I'm not giving you my ID. I don't have to. I'm a U.S. citizen." I go, "I'm on public property. You tell me to leave, I'll leave. I'll obey you because you're a law enforcement officer. But I'm not giving you my name." So Then I called the prison and said, hey, we need help getting these people out. And I got nothing but static from a lady. So I posted about that on X. Well, that post went viral to the tune of about 3.7 million people. I'm not exaggerating. You can actually look it up. And so, but here's what also helped. Because I had done, Twitter Spaces, I had run into a lady that's the right-hand woman of Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas. Now, I can't guarantee you he called, and Ken Paxton has no authority over a federal prison, but I'm pretty sure he did make a phone call to that prison. And then a lady that I met at a grassroots political action, Melinda Preston is her name, she made calls to some congressional staffers, and the congressman took time off from the inaugural balls to call that prison and say, let these people out. All right. That's how dialing into the local political party, dialing into the local grassroots, that's the effect you can have. And Jaleese Middleton walked out of that prison at 11:57. I didn't do the work. I just advertised the fact that they said they weren't going to let her out. But Attorney General Ken Paxton, Congressman Pat Fallon, and Congressman Brandon Gill deserve all the credit for their work in getting Jaleese out in accordance with the law of the land.
And that's the thing I know the politicians, Republicans or Democrats at the national level understand yet. And that is there is free speech on X. Yeah, there's a lot of BS and there's a lot of fake stuff, but there's real news happening at the same time if you start following the right accounts. And you can be a nobody and expose something and have it go viral and really affect change immediately. And or just expose the corruption. What I've loved is during these confirmation hearings, as senators were yelling at the candidates on X real time, you could watch who was donating to them. It was one of the craziest phenomenons I've ever experienced on media, where you could fact check these people in real time, not by some website a week later, but it was just going on real time.
You're absolutely right. And wasn't it funny to see the direct correlation between the amount of campaign contributions from Big Pharma to Elizabeth Warren and to Bernie Sanders, and how vociferous they were against RFK Jr. Again, it's like you said, it was an immediate fact check. X is where the truth is in American society. That's why I have my show there, and that's why I'm going to keep it there.
Yeah, and that's it doesn't mean there isn't a bunch of fake news being swirled around, because it is a world of misinformation. But that's why you're right. You have to fight for the truth. You have to verify and cross-verify, and you don't always get it right, but I've kind of adopted the rule to wait just a little bit, bit, because I almost got sucked into the Tim Waltz child molestation story, and I backed out of that one about a day into talking about it, and said, "Hey, I don't think this is legit." So again, you got to be careful, and I'm learning that. I learned a good lesson from that.
That's how Corey and I work. I'm the Gomer that'll just send everything with a shiny glimmer. I'm that fish that gets on the hook. Corey's the fish. No, we're going to throw this one back. We're going to throw this one back.
Yeah, I get it.
I get duped too. That's it's truth is not just this apparent thing. It's a process of elimination.
Absolutely.
It's a process of communication, and that's really the beauty of X, is it's constantly communicating, updating itself as the facts become more apparent. And yeah, you do, some of these, and I'm curious to hear your take on these plane crashes that have happened. But the immediate reaction to that compared to a few days, it does a world of difference when you wait a day or two.
Absolutely. We covered the helicopter colliding with the passenger jet. And what was really fascinating about that, it was actually one of my better shows, is we had an air traffic controller, a helicopter pilot, and then me as a pilot that had flown, commercial jet aircraft, all three of us talking about the accident and all the different things that could have gone wrong. And what was really funny is all three of us said that our own profession was to blame for not doing the right things. I fault the captain for not having his co-pilot's eyes out looking for other traffic. The helicopter pilot was out of the zone in altitude. All right, so he was clearly wrong. All right, and then the air traffic controller didn't make sure that the passenger airliner saw the helicopter pilot and that the helicopter pilot had the right traffic. So again, that was just a really interesting one. Aviation, a lot of really senior experienced pilots have retired. There's a lot of really junior people flying right now. You're going to see more mistakes. And unfortunately, aviation is a very unforgiving profession. Usually a mistake, it's probably going to be fatal. So, I know the airlines are doing their absolute best to build up a pilot base, but you just don't have, grizzled old dudes like me roaming around, sitting around with 5,000 hours of time in civilian jets, 3,000 in military jets. We've just seen a lot of things. And so you're a lot safer, with some dude like me sitting up in the cockpit than some relatively inexperienced person. I will tell you one thing I don't tolerate anymore, and I've stopped even reporting it. I will not bring race or sex into this conversation anymore. I want to live in a post-racial America to where you're just a man. You're an American, same as me. And so I don't report on it at all unless it's racial violence. And I will not identify the sex of the pilot because it's irrelevant. What does matter to me is, did they have adequate training? Were they adequately rested? What were their working conditions on that day? Those things matter. So, we covered that for about a day. And then I said, hey, we've pretty much exhausted all we can. Let's wait till the NTSB report comes out. We have a government that I believe will tell the truth on it now. And so let's just wait and see what's going on there. I'm not buying into all of this DEI hire garbage, that we have to have these. That might be true, but I just don't want to, until you prove it's true to me, I'm not going to report on it.
Do you think, though, by the push, the pushing out of veterans by political ideology, let's say that's really what happened. It was a political ideology being pushed around, and the people that didn't get along got kicked out. Do you think that the military is going to have to take time to recover from that?
Yes.
Like how long of a period of time are we talking? 5-10 years before we can rebuild our military to what a military should look like?
It depends on how many people they bring back in, how radical the changes are that Pete Hegseth makes. One of the things I really liked about him, and it is a limitation too, is the fact that he is an outsider coming into the largest bureaucracy in the world. So, but he's also a warfighter. So we need war fighters to go back into the Pentagon and put that culture in there. I will tell you that, being on, a trigger puller or a bomb dropper is different than a guy that's an admin clerk somewhere. And you got to have a warrior mentality when you're out there. And we've got to make sure that that's there. And it's not blunted with, oh, let's feel sympathy for our enemy, or, oh, I care more about the color of the person next to me in the cockpit or their sexual identity or anything like that. No, it's solely about the mission, okay? Your mission remains fixed, determined, and viable. It is to fight and win our wars. Everything else in your professional career is but corollary to this vital dedication. Douglas MacArthur said it in World War II, and it's true today, all right? We've got to get back to being a nation of warriors, a nation of alpha men on the battlefield that will go out, and I will tell you right now, I will kick your tail if you come against my country. And I'll do it to get 5 cents off the price of a Big Mac, because that's how much the American people mean to me. Everything I can do to win, I will do. And I want to see Americans get back to that mentality. I'm telling you right now, there is not a military force in the world that can stand up against us when you start putting people like me out there that, we're like Batman. We're evil, but we work for good. And so, you put people like me out there, I will figure out a way to break you. And it's not going to be pleasant.
I smile and laugh in fear. So,
I'm down for that.
yeah, Chris
I'm down.
got.
Well, we should all be, and you know, it's men like, you know,
But that's-
your relative, Curtis LeMay. You know,
Right.
it's guys like Colonel John Boyd, speed, violence, and maneuver. You know, Americans. Do you realize we haven't won a war since we renamed the Department of War into the Department of Defense? Maybe it's time to go back.
And that's the thing too, Larry, is, you know what, I'm all for that. I just don't want us to put our soldiers in harm's way for industrial growth in another country or for industrial deals being made in
Could not agree with you more.
You know, if someone's attacking us, then I want the meanest, most, I want the biggest punch Toby Keith black eye you could give, and settle it. I don't want to be playing warmonger with all these little countries and killing people just because they got lithium, or they've got these minerals and stuff. So we got to go conquer them, and if we lose 10 or 20 or 500 guys, so be it. At least we'll get the deal done. I think I'm not a fan of that type of.
You will find no more peaceful people than people that have actually been to war. We don't support these regime change operations. We're not a fan of going in and fighting for resources or anything like that. Now if you attack us, you're going to feel it's not going to be good for you. I'll put it that way. And I would argue that the Mexican drug lords, they got an ass kicking coming. And because of what they've done to us with fentanyl and what they're doing to their own people. And so, but really the Mexicans don't have an air force. We can do this with hunter-killer teams, the same airplanes that I flew, and jets that are going to, or other prop aircraft that can drop missiles or bombs, and just find them and kill them. Again, you use one of these and Uncle Sugar doesn't like you, you're going to die.
Larry, I don't know if you know this, but we actually have the main theme song for the drug cartel.
Because you had a bad day.
That's what I'm saying with the advancements with the drones and everything. I mean, I just with the technology and these fighter suits that they want to come out with and stuff, it's going to be just there are a whole bunch of RoboCop stuff, or just it's. I don't know if pilots will ever go away, but it seems like, with the drones and stuff and what you can do with those things, it's almost like,
well,
where do we go with that?
Pilots are going away. We are the limiting factor on the performance of an aircraft now. If you look, the U.S. Air Force is contracted to build an unmanned bomber. All right. Now, again, things like that, I guess I've watched too much Terminator because it does scare me to a point.
I watch those drone videos, and they toy with some of those people. I mean, it's scary. It's scary how effective they are and unforgiving they are.
Well, that's the thing. It's called an RMA, Revolution in Military Affairs, that's gone on in the Ukraine. And so the U.S. is spending a lot of money on drone and anti-drone warfare, and we have been for a long time. But, when I see these Chinese thousands of drones in different formations, which means they're all talking to each other. Yeah. What goes through my mind is 1,000 of those sitting on top of a U.S. infantry battalion talking to each other and targeting individual soldiers. So again, you're right. It's getting crazy again. Drones, I watched two $500 drones take out an M1 Abrams tank because they knew where to hit on that tank. So again, we need to be ready for the advanced warfare. And when we start talking, that's why we have to have the lead in AI. We cannot let the Chinese have it. Imagine Chinese mass production drones with an AI intelligence system and a 200 million man PLA army. Okay, that's going to be a very tough foe to beat.
Yeah, can't have it.
Can't have it. We've got to maintain military superiority over the Chinese Communist Party until such time as the Chinese people, Lao Beijing, wake up and stand up against the Chinese Communist Party.
Do you think Trump's approach here is to turn a blind eye to the social conditions of these countries and only view them as trade partners? You think that's a good idea, or do you think this is a temporary fix before the long-term solution happens?
Okay, I think all of Trump's actions, both domestically and externally, can be viewed through the lens of preparing for war against China. And you're saying, how is this possible? Look at the sea lanes of control. All right. What did he say? We want the Panama Canal back, or the American Canal, as he calls it. Okay. The Chinese own 2 ports, one on the north side, Cristobal, and one on the south side. I think it's Sao Paulo, but I could be wrong about that. And basically, the government agreed with President Trump, and they're leaving the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay. So we want our canal back, and you either agree to our terms or we're going to take it back. So there's one sea lane of control. What do you think we want Greenland and Canada? Okay, if the oceans melt, like they say, that route of travel is going to become the number one seagoing route for transportation. So we want that. South Africa, why did he single out South Africa? That's really strange. Out of all the countries that are against U.S. interest, they have a major naval base that is east of Cape Town down there, okay, that we want to be a part of. But more importantly, we do not want the Chinese to have access to that base because they already control the Solomon Islands and some ports up in Djibouti. So we're having to build naval bases in Somalia to offset that. So that would give them control of a triangle inside the Pacific Ocean. So again, we're fighting for sea lanes of control in that regard as well. Why would we want a base or to take over the Gaza Strip, the Suez Canal? Okay, again, everything is about sea lanes of control in those regards. Now, what do I believe we're going to see tomorrow? We're going to see Trump pull an inverse Nixon. And what I mean by that is Nixon went to China in 1972 to pull them out of the Soviet orbit. I think President Trump's actions tomorrow, and I believe he's actually going to pull us out of NATO tomorrow, are to pull an inverse Nixon and pull Russia into the American orbit and away from the Chinese. How about that?
Damn.
So, again, everything he's doing is with an eye on the enemy ahead of time. And again, for those of us that grew up watching Red Dawn, thinking of fighting the communists, my degree is in international affairs, Soviet area specialist with a minor in the Russian language. Okay, I was a committed anti-communist from day one. And I am telling you, it is in America's strategic interest to pull Russia close.
Yep. Вы говорите по-русски, да?
Da, товарищ.
Well, and here's the thing is Russia has, and I wrote an article about this the other day, has a long history of supporting America, and it makes sense. You know, that's why we're making fun of Canada and Greenland, because that creates a solid northern alliance all across the northern hemisphere. And all of those minerals, all of that oil, all of that stuff is ours. And Europe can just, you know, be Europe, you know, and have fun with your monarchy and your Rothschild's banking system. Because
Absolutely.
we're over it. And I
do
mean,
like their dollar bills, though. They don't crumple, supposedly. I don't know. It's all over TikTok. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
it's
Food for thought.
yeah, no, it's exciting. That's what the rumor is. So, I mean, did you work with NATO in your career?
Yeah, I was. My first assignment was at RAF Bentwaters in USAFE, United States Air Forces Europe, and we actually trained under the plan, and so there was some code words that were given, and literally, if we heard those code words, what I was instructed to do was turn my airplane west and fly, and at that particular time, put a hand over one eye and fly with the other one in case, an atomic bomb went off in that area. So, yeah, it was that was the initial plan on how we were going to defend Europe. It's crazy. The average expectancy of an A-10 pilot, life expectancy, was 2 weeks under the plan we were fighting back then. If Big Red had rolled through the Fulda Gap, to start World War III.
And why are we fighting with, like the real question is, why are we fighting with Russia? Russia just chooses not to have the same banking system as Europe, and they're mad about it. I mean, essentially, that's what it is. It's Rothschilds and Rockefellers are not allowed to play in the kingdom.
I mean, I think the communists for a while were an actual legitimate threat to us, but that's not the case anymore.
No,
and the other thing I tell you too is if we can make peace with Russia and pull back a little bit, I mean, we gain the instant benefit of 5,000 nuclear warheads not being pointed at our citizens.
True.
All right, just that little small thing. And if we could actually talk the Chinese into this, not that I'd ever trust them, but trust but verify, perhaps we could cut our defense budget. Think about that. Instead of 860 billion, maybe just 400 billion.
They say the logistics of pulling out of NATO, it will take at least a year. Now, under Trump, maybe 3-4 months. But I mean, you'd have to get all of our. We have a bunch of nuclear weapons sitting in Germany, don't we? I mean, there's
they're somewhere over there. I don't know where they are, but they're somewhere in Europe.
Read that on 4chan or something. Anyway,
it's probably out there, but I'm not going to confirm it.
It's just Fantom Facts here. But you would have to at least prepare for, I would think, 3 or 4 months to get our military out of Europe if we're going to leave NATO. And we have to assume that the Germans are going to be just cool as we walk away. And then on top of that, I mean, because what I keep hearing is the focus is China. It's all China now. We have decided, nope, we're not playing Europe's games anymore. We're just focusing on China. Do we feel there's a legitimate threat of a Chinese attack? Or is this just let's focus on who the real enemy could be for controlling our ports through, what is it, the 9 lines or whatever?
Well, again, I think as long as there is an organization as evil as the Chinese Communist Party is, it's prudent to be as strong as them. Now, do I want to see a shooting war against the Chinese? No, I do not. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of missiles. We don't ever want to do that if we have to. But I think by focusing on them now and then focusing on them economically as a threat to American power, it will change the game to where possibly we can avoid a shooting war. Now, again, are we just pivoting so we can continue the outrageous defense spending? We got to be careful there. You're absolutely right in saying that because the Chinese don't have the Navy and they don't have the Air Force that can really do anything about us. And as long as we control the sky and the sea lanes, they can't get their army here. So I'm not worried about it.
Well, the point of contention is Thailand, right?
Yes, the Taiwan. Yeah,
Taiwan.
Yeah. So and Taiwan is only critical to us as long as they have 75% of the chips that we need manufactured there. We build our own chips on our own soil. Do I really care? Nope.
Today they just
not my problem.
Yeah, today they just signed $100 billion deal to move was it Taiwan? Thailand, whatever. Chip company to U.S. So it seems like, hey, we're trying to bring them over here as quickly as possible. And I wonder, are we gonna give it to the Chinese, and then we're gonna have a new Cold War?
I hope not. But, really, I think we need to start playing reindeer games inside Chinese society and getting them to yearn for more freedom, those type of things, and then start doing all the little nasty things that we know how to do, like, pipelines blowing up, electrical power plants blowing up, that type of thing, like we did with the original pipeline to Europe where Ronald Reagan did something and that pipeline just had a problem all of a sudden.
Oh, it is an American tradition to blow up pipelines.
Yeah, we're really good at it. That's a funny thing. Like I've always said, people underestimate Americans in combat. We are really good at breaking things. Like it is a skill we have. It is a national art.
Yeah. If you're mad at it, you smash it. I mean,
exactly.
Just, we're the hammer.
Yeah. My favorite story is that one, what was it, like on D-Day or something? And it was that captain, and he couldn't get in range. And so he flooded half of his ship bring the tilt up so he could and it's just, there's so many stories like that I love where it's break it a little bit and we'll make it better,
Well, I mean, it is amazing how innovative we can truly be, at times. And that's why I say we are really good at war. I mean, it just sounds crazy, but you get this off idea and it just works. We're really good at finding solutions to things. The Germans say that American officers are good because they manage chaos on a daily basis, and that's all war is. So,
well, and honestly, there's been a war for information in the United States that has been going on at an increased level since 2014, and that's a war everyone can fight. It's very easy to go through and find stories like yours of people. I mean. You hear about stories like this on like Alex Jones or stuff like that, but to put a face to someone that was put, it wasn't just like you weren't put in Martha Stewart jail.
No.
You were put with people that you were sworn enemies to on the battlefield. You were, or threatened to
just to break him, just to try. I mean, that's the craziest part. They start this, with being by yourself and putting the crazy person in there, and then the threats with the, that's just, man, they hand you a knife without it being a weapon, and they're just like, okay, here we go, do it for us. And it's like, but you're strong enough and just dialed in enough to just look past their bullshit and to fight through, to get to that other side. And I mean, that takes, I give you all the
thank you.
Yeah, give you everything, because I don't know a lot of people that could do that or would be able to do that, because you would just get swallowed up in the hell, and you just, if you don't have that strength and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, unfortunately, people crumble to it. So
absolutely,
I can't imagine. I can't imagine it at all. And and these stories, and I'm glad that you come on and you've spoken your story and told your story. And I mean, you followed you on X. I want to know about the cell phone. I saw that you said that the FBI returned your cell phones. You throw that thing in the trash, or
no? I'm gonna take it. It's actually two of them. Hold on, I'll grab them. Just give me a second. So I've just got some pictures of my little 7-year-old boy. But this is what they give back to me. Look at that thing smashed in the bottom there. All right. And then this one, you had the picture of it up on X. I mean, who the hell are they to return my property in that condition when I give them 2 operable cell phones? And I haven't even plugged in the computers yet, which I'm dreading doing that to see. I don't think the screens are broken, but
you never know. I mean, I know
there has to be. I'm in talks with lawyers. There has to be a massive lawsuit for what they've done. I don't want class action because that's going to take too long. But I believe that based off of what they did, I have grounds for some serious remunerative things. I mean, like I said, they dropped all the charges. I spent 2 years in prison. They tried to kill me 3 times. They destroyed my life, destroyed my reputation. I've had my son taken away from me, which we didn't talk about, but I'll get him back. It's just a matter of getting financial house in order, because if I go in front of this judge without a job, she's going to deny me.
Yep.
I have to have all my ducks in a row before I can get my son back.
Yeah. And God, oh man.
Well, and
that fight too. That fight
after the show, I'd like to talk to you about that too, because I work with an organization that that specializes in that.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
because I saw the when Trump did all the pardons, and it seemed like a lot of the J6ers, they got right on Twitter and was like, I remember seeing one of the guys saying that he was going to sue Liberty Arms, the safe company, because they gave the FBI his code and stuff to get into the safe. Like, what I mean? Just stuff like that, where all this shit was taken from all you guys, and it was either returned and terrible shape or it wasn't ever returned at all. And after being pardoned and everything, there's like, well, you might get it or you might not. It's like, I mean,
no. It's you got to fight for that stuff. I mean, I
Yeah.
intend to sue Charles Schwab Bank. I had a relationship with them for 27 years, and before I was ever found guilty, they just debanked me. You want to talk about, and now I always have two banks just in case I get debanked again. I took out a ton of cash when the Canadian government seized, or froze the bank accounts of people that were donating to the truckers in that protest, because it was like, if they can do that there, they can do that here. So again, there's just a ton of prices. PayPal account closed, Amazon account closed. They did all these things. They just took away your rights before any legal action. So again, there's lawsuits in a million places. Did you know that if you call somebody like an insurrectionist, you're actually calling them a felon, which is textbook defamation under the law. So all of these, news agencies that had nothing but malign things to say, I want to take a look in the state of Texas at defamation charges against them and slander, because it wasn't true. And so I would tell you that's one of the hardest things, is to have people doubt you and who you are and what you've done. I had a niece come up to me and, let me back off for a second. So this really happened. I was dating at the time a woman from Nigeria, beautiful African-American woman. I would say African-American, but she wasn't an American yet. So beautiful. And she's reading. We're sitting together on the couch and she's reading and she says, "I didn't know you were a white supremacist." I was like, I didn't either. That's news to me.
News to me, baby.
So yeah, but my nieces said, the second we saw that, we knew all the rest of it was a lie as well, because that's just not who you are. So again, their own lies work against them. And, we say this time and again, I think honestly, and again, this is the Christian coming out in me, everything that they've meant to work for evil will work for good eventually, but we have to fight for it. I think the President Trump that is going to leave America in 2028 is so much better than the President Trump that would have left America in 2024. I think they've given him 4 years to plan and to execute and to move this country and steer it in the right direction.
Well, and to go through the process you went through and realize how corrupted it was. Because he went in there 2016 thinking that Obama was just a bad president and there was a few bad eggs. Yeah. And he walked out of there realizing that it was such a big organization running against him that they could sway an election and then go after him politically. And after they realized they could do that to a president, they went after every single one of you, because who's going to defend you if they can go after a president?
Absolutely.
And it needed to be stopped. And that's, that they always say the assassination was the point it switched. And I think that was the point it cemented him. But the point where it got everyone's attention was the mugshot.
Absolutely.
Because everyone who had ever been through the political system knew exactly what was going on.
Absolutely.
Anyone had been maligned, anything like that, you knew what was going on. This was a dog and pony show. And then the assassination, well, then, that just sealed it.
Absolutely. And, wouldn't it be nice to know something more about that assassination attempt? Again, that's yet another thing they've hidden from us, both of those guys. So Matthew Crooks and whatever that other guy's name is.
Yeah. Now, hey, he may have had help, but there's we're on. I do another podcast with the great conservative project, the Talking Heads podcast, and we're supposed to have Hashkana. Slaughtered that, but she went to the same synagogue with Josh Shapiro from high school.
Okay.
And worked in the government with him, and is strong. It has evidence, she believes, and has presented it that he was involved. But I can't verify any of that. But whatever the case was, it's very fascinating that Linsky shows up there to Pennsylvania and signs a bunch of bombs. And
correct me if I'm wrong, but I read something today that said the only thing that CNN has covered of President Trump's was that rally, that one rally.
There is
Other than that, they haven't covered a single thing, and they're not covering his speech tomorrow. That one rally.
Really?
Yeah.
There was a community notes on that, and it said that not true. They covered the Madison Square Garden one 2 months after.
Okay. All right. Fine.
I love
we're two now.
Community notes. Yeah.
Yep. No. I love community notes. I really do. But yeah, okay.
All they're doing is compiling all these files. Everybody wants all these, and it's just like I saw on Twitter today. It was like, okay, hypothetical. Would you take all the files, the 9/11, the J6, the assassinations, Epstein, all of these, or would you take the elimination of taxes and everything? And a lot of people, it was like a split. Like, yeah, they want to know about, all the files and everything, but they're also on the other end. It's like a lot of people might already have an idea of what is kind of going on in that realm. So it's like, why not take the no tax on, no, all the stuff that he wants. I found that really interesting today. I was like, that
is a good question.
Yeah. Just kind of where my thing is, I kind of, in a perfect world, we'd want both, but it's like on the other part, it's like, we've already dealt with getting taxed out the wazoo and all this bullshit. So fucking, I want everything y'all went through. I want that to come to head. I want to know about the Epstein, 9/11, all of it, even if it is X, Y, and Z parties involved. I mean, put these motherfuckers out there on blast and let's try to shine some light on that. I mean, so it's kind of, I didn't know where to really go, left or right, when I was reading that article today, but I found it very interesting that it was very split. A lot of people were, we already kind of know the government and Israel and blah, blah, blah. And, we've already been getting taxed for our fucking eternity. So what is it if it changes? So, can you said with your nieces and everything, I don't, if it's, we don't have to go into it, but I was just curious with like rebuilding like the family and everything after, getting out, getting pardoned. Has that been, I know you said, your son is not with you at the moment, but so how's that whole process? Can we go into that a little bit or?
Yeah, just a little bit. And then honestly, guys, I want to wrap up. I was up at 4:30 in the morning. So
oh shoot,
you're well past my normal bedtime. So, I would say it's a work in progress still. I was very disappointed in some members of my family that it's not that they don't support me. They just didn't take the time, because I'm the oldest son. And so I do all the work. I keep the family together. I make sure that people have a good time. It was always my boat they went out on, for family get-togethers and things like that. They came to my beach house that I'd rented for the family reunion down there. And so to be as abandoned as I was by some people in my family hurt, but God commands you to forgive, and I'm a good soldier. So I'm working to rebuild that. My daughter hasn't talked to me since January the 7th of 2021. She is graduating from medical school. She's subsequently got married unbeknownst to me. And I found out I'm going to be a grandfather, and she still won't talk to me. So, she believed the media lies. I'm hoping that she comes to her senses, but there's nothing I can do about that. My older daughter. And then, I will tell you that your parents stick with you through thick and thin. I know other people's children have as well, but I just wasn't that lucky, unfortunately.
Larry, I mean, what you've been through, it's good to humanize it because that's what it is. You can read about it and then you can forget about it, but these are lives that were affected not because of crimes committed, but because you were political opponents and you were framed for doing something you weren't guilty of.
The other thing too is I will tell you, you almost, or at least I put myself in immediate isolation from my friends. And the reason I did that was to protect them from the FBI. I didn't want the FBI to know who my friends were and cause problems in their life. And so, it was kind of funny because when I got out and I started, rebuilding some of these things, one of the guys said, "So did you not contact me because you didn't want them to come after me?" I go, "Hi, of course." He's like, "I knew that was the reason." He's like, "I knew there was no way you wouldn't just not talk to me." And so again, that's just, I've rebuilt most of my friendships. I wish I could tell you that family was as easy, but it just never seems to be, isn't it? That's just life.
It's family, you love them through thick and thin. That's for sure. Well, Larry, thank you so much for coming on the show, staying up late. Sorry I didn't put the show in military time.
No, that's all right. I'm good. I can interpret. I've got a pretty good brain. So
we are finishing the night as the #1 live show on X. So awesome. What would you like to promote before we before we close out the show here?
Well, I would say please follow me on X at Larry Brock Jr. I'd ask you to join my show, The Reckoning, from noon Eastern Standard until 1. It's 1 hour of unfiltered political truth. I'll always do my very best to tell you the truth, on the news of the day. And then, I would ask you that when I make my announcement, and it will be soon, as to what I'm running for, to support me there as well. I'll put something up, on a campaign website. But again, I am the type of guy you want in office because I will stand on principle. You cannot buy me, period. It is not going to happen. And I will vote with the way the party and the people that I represent think I should vote. You're not going to get any rhino action out of me.
And LarryBrockJr.com, they can follow you there too.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Larry, thank you again so much.
Right, appreciate it. Thank you for interviewing me. All right. You guys have a great night.
You too.